Welcome to MyCounselor.Online. I'm Cassie, and today I get to interview Melissa Abellio. Melissa, thanks for meeting with me.
Thanks for having me, Cassie.
Yeah, Melissa is one of our awesome therapists on our MyCounselor.Online team, and today we get to talk about her article, just what to do after an affair. So that's got to be one of the scariest, most heart-wrenching places to be. So I'm excited to talk about this today because I think it's so valuable, and I know that there are a lot of hurting people that this article is going to help and speak to and just give some direction when you just feel absolutely overwhelmed. So define affair, if you would, because I think that's an important thing to start with.
Absolutely. Well, I think that the word affair, if we were to define it and break it down, I think it's breaking the fidelity of your relationship. And I think that's going to happen in a number of different ways. I think it can be with an actual sexual affair when you're actually having intercourse or engaging sexually in some way, shape, or form with somebody else outside of your spouse. I think it also can be an emotional type of an affair where not somebody, but your spouse is actually conversating and building a emotional connection and relationship with somebody other than you. And that can take the form of having, romantic kind of conversations, maybe even sexual in nature, where there's like sexting or pictures being sent of that nature. And there also, could be the infidelity that would be considered like pornography, where your spouse is and has been using pornographic material over a period of time instead of engaging with you sexually. And so I think that as well could be considered an infidelity or something that would be considered under affair recovery as well, just because so much trust is broken when somebody has been using pornographic material for a long period of time.
So just to clarify, because I think affairs start as a slippery slope. If you are in a space where your spouse is having more interaction with somebody than you are comfortable with, then it is very much worth it. You are not crazy to think, this makes me uncomfortable, or I feel like too much attention is going into this relationship. And then it is a wise thing to talk to your spouse about that. And I think oftentimes the spouse that is headed down the wrong path has the response of, don't worry about it. It's not a problem. It's no big deal. So I just want to encourage people that are in that circumstance. First of all, if you're in that circumstance, feel free to go to your spouse. But also if you are the spouse and your partner comes to you and they say, this is making me uncomfortable, I think we are one, and we have to continue to pour into that relationship. So I just, hopefully it never has to get to this point. Hopefully there can be open dialogue. But if it does get to this point, I just, you hear a lot of horror stories of, well, it was nothing, but then it was something.
Yes.
And my spouse knew it, and they tried to talk to me about it, and I didn't think it was anything. So it's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking.
And when you have a couple come to you and one of them has just told the other that they have been having an affair, or one found out, what are the common reactions that you see? And I just want to talk about this because I would love to hear some of them, just so that the person watching this, if their spouse has had an affair, I think first of all, we feel so lonely because our spouse did that. But I think also because we think nobody else feels like this. So what are some common reactions?
Oh, that's a great question. I think a lot of what I see sometimes is The spouse who's been betrayed just feels utterly devastated and alone, and just feels like they start questioning everything about their spouse because they don't know what's true, what's not true now, because their spouse has lied to them in this area of their relationship. And so now they're wondering, who are they? Who have I been married to? When they were saying I love you to me, did they mean it? There's just so much questioning that's going on in your mind, and amplifies a lot of time the pain just from the affair in general. And so I think I see a lot of that. Sometimes I see the person who has been betrayed as well becoming really, really clinging to their spouse and wanting to make sure that they're watching every little thing their spouse is doing just so that they can make sure that they're not engaging in an affair again. They kind of become a private investigator of their spouse and get really hyper focused on what their spouse is doing and not doing, just because they're scared. They're just terrified because the most devastating thing they now realize they had no control over. And so they're in a way of trying to gain control back, there's this desire to control their spouse and what their spouse is doing and not doing. Trying to be preventative in nature. And then I think for the person who's done the betraying, I think sometimes I see a genuine brokenness, and honestly sometimes a relief in that person, like, oh, like they know I don't have to hide this anymore. And there's a genuine sense of relief, like, okay, it's out there. Maybe I can change, So sometimes there's that response. Sometimes there's just a lack of brokenness there, a lack of humility, and almost like a justification of the actions, because maybe they felt that their spouse wasn't kind or loving to them in the past. And so there's this heart of, gosh, I just feel like I don't feel that bad about this because I felt so hurt in the past. And so
that's a wide gamut.
It's a wide gamut. And I think a lot of it has to do with the person and who they are, and also the kind of affair that occurred, and then also what the marriage was like previous to the affair. I think all of those things play a role in how people respond and react. But I would say those are the common things that I see.
Yeah, I'm feeling that seems very overwhelming to me as a non-clinician, non-counselor, but I also feel a sense of gratefulness hearing you talk that have walked with couples through this. You know how to pull those pieces out and how to move forward. And so that's really good. How challenging is affair recovery?
Oh, I would say that it's so hard, mostly because it's just devastating for the whole family. Sometimes it's devastating when you're not sure if the couple wants to recover from the affair. I think that's hard when that's come into question. Sometimes that happens. And so that's a challenge. But I think that the powerful thing about affair recovery is that you can recover from it. I've seen couples recover from some situations that I don't think anybody would think that they could recover from. But when there's like true humility and brokenness and a commitment to healing on both sides and taking ownership of responsibility and then healing the relationship, it is so powerful for me to watch like God work in that way. And so it's hard work. It's like nitty gritty at times, because you really have to have some hard conversations, but it's so powerful to see people respond to that. So it's powerful, but also hard. It's hard to be a part of. It's hard to say the things that sometimes you don't want to say to clients. So you have to have hard conversations. But yeah, it's powerful to see people change also. So it's worth it in those situations where it happens. You're like, oh.
I love that, because I think it could feel so hopeless, but you being on your side, you have seen amazing, you have seen full recoveries, you have seen marriages even better maybe afterwards, because of the growth and the humility coming from that situation.
Yeah, that's oftentimes what happens, is that we're dealing with really the root issues individually for each person and the root issues in the marriage. And if they're committed to working on those things over time, they are going to have a much different, much more connected, emotionally safe relationship than they had before because they're committed to working on those things. So it's pretty cool to see that.
That's amazing.
So, yeah.
That's exciting. That gives so much hope. You talk a lot in your article about time, about how recovery and working through the things and moving forward takes time. And one of the things that you talk about specifically is making the decision whether or not to stay married. And is that, I think when, and even to forgive and forget, like those things are, they kind of all go together. Like, well, you have to forgive. The Bible says you need to forgive. Also, are you going to stay married? Because, you need to decide right now. And what is that? Do you see it that way?
No, I would say that the shock of the affair is so overwhelming. It's so hard to make decisions clearly. And I would say that after you've experienced the tidal wave and things have calmed down and you've been able to process what has happened, it's a lot easier to make a lot more clear decision in those cases. But I think that it makes sense that when we're in that situation, or that when those who have experienced this, that they would feel like, I need to decide this right now because this wasn't right, or I've been wronged, or I need to protect myself, so I need to make a decision right now, or I need to make a decision to stay right now because I don't want to lose them. There's such a range of emotion that I think it's important to like reel it back and be able to understand that a crisis just happened, and that making a long-term decision about your life in the middle of the crisis is probably not going to be the best way to make that decision. And so I really encourage my clients to not have that false sense of urgency that sometimes comes with the territory of an affair, and just let the tidal wave, there's a lot of damage after a tidal wave and you don't even know what it is until it's gone. And so sometimes you have to wait and see what that damage is, so that then you can make a decision about, do I want to rebuild this? Do I want to scrap this? And I think you can't know that until the tidal wave's gone. So,
That's really good. I think that's really encouraging. And it's just really a practical piece of helping somebody who is either the perpetrating spouse or the perpetrating, I guess that's the word, but, or the spouse who has been a victim of the affair. Just to let's sit with it and work with it, and then go from there. That's the tidal wave example is so helpful, I think.
Good. I'm glad. It's hard to think of analogies sometimes for these scenarios, but that's the best thing I can come up with to explain that.
I liked it.
Good.
So this has been a good interview and a good article. And I just, if you're watching this and you have been the victim of an affair, or, your spouse has had an affair, I'm sorry. And we are, we agree with you, and we're here for you. And hopefully this article has been helpful. There's a lot of other great articles at MyCounselor.Online, and of course this article, which you should definitely go and read in its entirety. But thanks, Melissa, for meeting with me and for taking on a challenging topic and just getting real with it and putting the time and energy into it. I know it's your heart and that you love to help couples, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate you so much.